Hi, my name is Wade Simmons of Amber Education Services. Quite often the question is asked when one is trying to return to work whether or not there is financial support for training. And the answer is yes. Through the employment program of BC, there is in fact funding services one can access so that they can engage in training so they can more readily return to work. Now there are a number of services available. This video is not going to focus on services if you're talking about apprentices or if you are not attached to employment insurance, but rather our focus today is going to be on those that are as defined as attached to employment insurance. And I'll come back to that definition in more detail. The idea of this video is to permit you enough information so that you can assess whether or not this is the right plan for you in your search for work. If it is, you want to talk to your Employment Program of BC case manager or employment service advisor about your next steps. So perhaps the first question up is who can apply for this training support? And let's take a look at some of the technical requirements. Now there's a lot of information here, and so you'll note that there's an information sheet which is attached to this website, and by all means you may want to print that off so that you have something in writing. But let's look at these criteria in order. The first is that we need to be attached to employment insurance, and that is the idea that we are currently on a regular claim, or within the last 3 years we've had some type of claim which has now expired, or within the last 5 years we are on a parental claim which has now expired. Secondly, we need to be unemployed by definition. That is, we are working less than 20 hours a week and currently looking for work. Thirdly, we need to have exhausted our job search. So we have attempted to find work with our current skill set but have been unable to do so and can demonstrate that. Fourthly, there is both financial need. We need to demonstrate that we require these funds, but also financial capacity in the sense there will be some costs not covered by the program, and an individual must be able to show that they can cover those costs for themselves. And you must live in the area served by your Work BC Employment Service Centre. And so you want to make sure you're contacting the appropriate centre, and you want to book an appointment to see a case manager or employment service advisor. So those are the technical requirements to access the program. From a discretionary point of view, we need to see that an individual has chosen the most direct or shortest return to work. Not always defined as the shortest piece of training, but typically that means that the coursework is something around a year in length, perhaps less. There are exceptions, of course, and you want to talk to your case manager or call us directly about that. What you'll find is that Amber Education works very collaboratively within the Employment Program of BC with the service centres that it is part of the team with. And so you'll find you may be contacting us, you may be talking to your case manager, or all of us may get together to analyze a particular situation. So by now you may have assessed that you are in fact eligible for training support services. So the next question up is which schools are eligible? And that really breaks down into two categories. The institution needs to either be public, or if it's private, usually needs to be accredited by the Private Career Training Institutes Agency. The PCTIA has a website, pctia.bc.ca, where you can see a list of these accredited schools. Now there are exceptions. Sometimes a school only needs to be registered, or not registered at all, as is the case often with driver's training. So to make sure your school is eligible, give us a call or talk to your case manager. You can also email us, and we're happy to answer your questions quickly and efficiently. Now as well, your training needs to be full-time in nature. Again, exceptions can apply, so talk to us about that if necessary. We do certainly prefer classroom structured training as opposed to distance or correspondence, but those are eligible categories. And again, there are some criteria involved, so please contact us or contact your case manager to talk about those exceptions. But otherwise, the choice of school is yours. You take a look at it and make sure that this is the right training for you that's going to enable you to return to work. All right, so we've assessed that we are eligible. We have chosen an institution which is eligible. So now what are the categories of funding which are available to us? The first one up perhaps is tuition. Certainly there is money for this. You want to talk to your school about all of the costs associated with your training, and we'll need to understand those through a letter of acceptance that you're going to receive from your school, which will identify tuition. There can be limitations on these categories, so check our website or talk to your case manager or call us to talk more about it in detail. Secondly, books and supplies. Quite often there are these costs which are associated with training, and they can range from textbooks and pens and paper through to a hard hat in order to go to school. Talk to us about this because it needs to be a consumable, something which is going to be used during the training as opposed to a tool of the trade, something which you're going to take with you and use in the workforce. There's living supports, so that if your EI claim is not enough, or if it runs out during the training, or if it has already expired, then we can discuss the financial need for living supports during your training. We should note that these supports are certainly defined as basic, and it is likely that most people's budget would not be entirely covered by this category. And so we'll need to understand that a person has the financial capacity to get through the training knowing that these supports are not covering all of their personal budget. If needed, there are dollars for dependent care, transportation, and living away supports if an individual has to go somewhere away in order to take their training. All of these supports are negotiated on a case-by-case basis. We're happy to have a general conversation with somebody about the value of these supports, but really it's going to come down to seeing the application, understanding the budget that's being put forward, and the costs of the training with the institution that you have chosen. So give yourself plenty of time to gather this information, talk to us about it, and make sure that it's clear in the application that you present. One of our staff will be in touch with you to talk about these categories and make sure we really pin down what they are. But at the end of the day, it's not unusual for us to see an individual contracted for multiples of these categories, which results in a reasonably sized contract for dollars during their training. The idea, of course, is to provide the financial ability to get through the training. But as I said, it's not always enough for an individual to get through with just the supports of this program. So take a look at your personal budget and be thinking about how it is that you can blend different categories of support, not only from this program, but perhaps from elsewhere in order to achieve your training goal. The monies received from the program are not a loan nor a bursary. It's not something which is typically repaid, but it is taxable income, and we want everyone to be well aware that there may be some impact or consequences in receiving these funds once a person files their personal tax return. So firstly, realize that you will receive a T4E from the program for the gross amount that you receive during the calendar year. We urge everyone to talk to some sort of tax professional and understand the impact that this may have on that tax return. There may be taxes owing when that return is filed. There may be an impact on the tax credits that a person is currently receiving, either provincially or federally. So before embarking on this program, make sure that you're well aware that there is a T4E to come and tax consequences which need to be considered before engaging in training support. So I've done a couple of these videos now, and typically the feedback that I get is that I am too stern when I'm working with the camera. And perhaps those last couple of categories of tax consequences and funding support amounts makes me come across all the sterner. So let's turn to something a little more positive and talk about the keys to a strong application. Historically in this program, we have approved the vast majority of applications that have come in, and we want to approve those applications. Nothing is to be gained by turning them down. We want to work collaboratively with you and with your case manager or employment service advisor to make sure that the application you put forward has the best chances for success. What we need to see, what we're looking for, is a complete application. Please fill the whole thing out. Now, the application is going to be provided to you by your case manager, but if you have questions, by all means, email us or call us, and we're happy to respond and provide clarity around any of the issues you may be having. We need to see that there's a great chance for success. Success defined as finding full-time or sustainable employment when you complete the training. And so we'll need from you labor market information, that is, potential job opportunities that show that the field you have in mind is in fact one which there is a strong likelihood of success or employment. On the flip side of that, we need to see that you have completed an exhaustive job search, that you have been looking for work with your current skills, but in fact cannot be successful with that. Perhaps employers have even pointed out that they would be interested in hiring you if you held a certain certificate. Quite often what we have seen over the years is individuals have great amounts of experience, but don't have the piece of paper to go with it, or they have that certificate, but in fact it is outdated. And so here's a chance then to get that certificate or to update it if we can show that we do in fact need it and that there is great opportunity to find that job when you're finished. In describing the training, to come back and be a little bit repetitive, it does need to be the most direct return to work. So again, not always the shortest course, but not unnecessarily choosing a long course either. So as you put together your application, be sure that it's complete, be sure that you've got labor market information that shows job opportunities, and on the flip side, show that you have exhausted your job search and that in fact training is necessary, and that training is the most direct way to return to work. So I just finished saying that I wanted to be more positive in this video, and yet now I find myself turning to the fact that some applications are declined. But hopefully in speaking about that, you can foresee these concerns or pitfalls and avoid them. So even though we are approving the vast majority of applications, obviously that means that some are in fact being turned down. So why does that happen? The first issue up perhaps is that people are applying too late. We need you to apply with enough time such that all of the paperwork can be completed, all of our work on our end can be done, and we can have you in to sign a contract before your training begins. Typically, that means you're going to be applying to us a good 3 or 4 weeks in advance of either the earlier of your start date or when tuition or other monies are due in order to have you under contract before those funds start to roll out. So again, a good month in advance to submit that application would be an ideal timeline. Of course, there are exceptions, and we'll always do our best with less time. But to maximize your opportunities, think 4 to 6 weeks perhaps in advance. Incomplete applications, where there are clearly pieces missing and we can't seem in working with you to fill those pieces in. Clarity is very important to us, and we get that through a complete application. So again, call us to make sure that when you do submit this, it is as complete as you can make it. As I mentioned, we need strong opportunities for employment upon completion, and quite often we get applications in which we don't see that. And so we'll need an individual to go back out and find better labor market information, and that ties back into not having enough time to complete this before the training begins. So make sure when you do attach that labor market information, it is clearly jobs which are full-time in nature, or again, full-time to your capacity, and jobs which are requiring the very certification that you're looking to obtain through your training. A third issue would be that a person seemingly has not exhausted their job search. They can't demonstrate that they have applied to multiple opportunities and not received any kind of response. Or that perhaps not much time has gone by. They have just recently been let go from work or laid off, and they have not spent that time looking for opportunities, but rather want to jump into training because it is available. Typically, that kind of scenario is not going to work. Again, not impossible, but certainly less likely. As we mentioned again, the most direct return to work. And so training which seems to be unnecessarily long because there is coursework which is clearly shorter than that, which will achieve employment, is available. We need to make sure that you have selected a course which is one which we can describe as the fastest return to work. And then there are financial concerns or financial capacity issues. As I've mentioned throughout the video, this program likely will not cover an individual's complete budget, and not all expenses are going to be eligible for funding. And so if we're talking about perhaps 10 months of training, we need to see that a person can not only make up any costs which are ineligible on a one-time basis, but also be able to cover their monthly expenses which the program is not providing support for. A good example of this might be debt payments. And so if an individual needs a few $100s per month in order to maintain those debt payments, the question becomes, where is that source of funds for that category? Because it can't be the program. And so we need to see that there is financial capacity from each applicant to maintain their household budget during the length of the training. But again, you want to work to avoid these things I've mentioned. If you're feeling like it's something which you need to discuss, I keep saying it over and over again, and I do mean it, give us a call, throw us an email. We're happy to work with you before you submit that application so that you are not facing a decline and then perhaps running out of time before your training starts to find some alternate piece of funding. Now, I should mention that we do have an appeal process. So if your application is in fact declined, you are welcome to appeal it. But again, you must receive an approval before that training starts. And we do need to get you under contract before the training begins, or any monies that you want to be reimbursed for are rolled out. So again, applying early makes all the sense in the world. So now we know what we need in a strong application. So let's focus on the actual steps to apply. First, you're going to begin at your WorkBC Employment Service Centre. You want to talk to a case manager or your employment service advisor, and you're going to be working on something called your action plan. And this action plan needs to refer you to training. This plan will also list any considerations or issues that you're having in finding work so far, and list your training goal, which is to, of course, take the training that you have in mind. With this supported action plan, you're now able to move forward. Amber Education has created a pre-application, a simple one-pager that will give us a chance to give you some feedback before you embark on the actual application. This pre-application is optional, but if you would like to hear from us before you move forward, then please complete it, turn it into your case manager, they will get it to us, and we will give you a call and describe any concerns that we see or any positives that we see as well, so that you know that you're on the right track. Once done, you then move on to the application itself, which again is provided to you by your case manager. You won't find it here on the website. If you need any help completing the application, as always, please give us a phone call or an email, but otherwise turn that in when you are ready, that good 4 to 6 weeks in advance of your training start date. We need a few days, call it 5 to 7 business days, to reach a decision, and we'll get back to you with a conditional approval. That is to say, you're approved, but there are some subjects that we need to meet. Because typically in most applications, there are some issues which need to be addressed before the contract can be signed. Perhaps your training or your employment requires a criminal record check, or some sort of a medical or health test. These things will need to be accomplished, but we don't want anyone to spend money before or during this application process. So apply to us without those things, become conditionally approved. Now that you know where you stand, you can go and get those things done, and assuming them to be done satisfactorily, we can then move on to actually signing a contract with you for the duration of your training. Now, up front, it's sometimes difficult to forecast all of the expenses that you're going to incur during your training, so understand that there is some opportunity to amend your contract, but we are trying to nail down the majority or the best case scenario for your training costs right up front. But we do understand that completion dates can vary, or that specific amounts can vary from time to time, and you're welcome to call us. We will need another application or an updated application from you in order to accommodate an amendment, but nonetheless, that does exist. So as you are completing your application, do your best, but don't worry about making sure you pin down every dollar figure and every timeline perfectly. So the steps to apply: see your case manager, complete an action plan, move on to the pre-application stage if you wish, receive positive feedback from Amber Education on that, complete the application, get a conditional approval, meet those conditions, sign a contract, know that if necessary we can amend that contract during your training. So now you understand the steps to apply and what we're looking for in a strong application. But there are some final tips, a few more considerations for you to be aware of. If your EI claim is still going to be enforced during your training, then understand that it needs to be amended to permit you to be in training as opposed to looking for work. There's a form called a Section 25, which you'll complete with us and we'll administer for you. But understand this will have some impact on how you report to Service Canada as it relates to your claim. We'll need receipts from you. That is to prove or demonstrate that the monies received from the program were in fact used for the costs of training. So you want to keep those and be sure to provide copies to us. Similarly, we also need to track attendance and progress in the program. And so we're going to ask you to report on your attendance and show us that you are set to graduate on time and haven't fallen behind in the training. Upon completion, we're going to need a transcript or a certificate demonstrating successful graduation from the course. Some programs have a break in training, whether it's that summer break or some sort of holiday or vacation break. And there are requirements as to the length of these breaks. And if it's too long, there may not be support during them. And if that's the case, we'll need to understand how it is that you're going to finance or maintain your household budget during these breaks, such that your overall training can be completed. Some courses have work placements, like a practicum or a co-op, where they put you on the job for a period of time. Again, there are limits around how long this can be. So talk to us about that and we'll explain those limits to you. And again, understand that if they're not eligible for support, you'll have to self-finance those periods of your training. Remember that costs incurred prior to signing a contract cannot be reimbursed by the program. So keep in mind that if you're spending monies on deposits for training or tests or criminal record checks, things of that nature, those are going to be considered your contribution towards the training. So the idea is that from this video, you will have received enough information that you understand the process and the requirements. Give yourself the best chance for success. Leave enough time to work with your case manager or employment service advisor. Give us enough time in order to approve your application. Include with that application strong labor market information, clear reasons as to why this training is necessary and why this training is the most direct return to work. If you can do that, then we're off to a good start and we're well on our way to approving this application. If you have any further questions, please give us a call or talk to your local WorkBC Employment Service Centre. Thank you for your time.